Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to the October 31st Halloween, special Halloween meeting of the Concord Middle School Building Committee.
Should be in costume.
Yeah, I know.
For everyone to come out in the rain and early. I'd also want to just take a minute to thank everybody for the effort right now. This seems like an extraordinary busy time because it is a very busy time for the committee. It will get better, okay, once we have the designer in place, working with OPM, things will become a lot more calmer, and the meeting schedule will revert back to a normal meeting schedule. And they will have a detailed plan so we can plan for what we do. But having said that, I appreciate all of the effort, particularly on the design committee right now, which is extraordinary amount of time and focus on an important issue. So I wanted to say that before we begin. It's very much appreciated. Today we have really three significant things that we want to accomplish today. First is the presentation by the Sustainability Committee. And I suspect, Matt and I have talked, we suspect that'll be somewhere in the order of a half an hour to 35 minutes of presentation, and then we've allowed 45 minutes so we can have interaction and questions, okay? The second item is a report from the Communications Subcommittee to talk about communication strategy, and they will do that. I think that will run approximately 15 minutes, something like that, with a discussion. And then the other important thing that we want to do is we just want to review the upcoming schedule so everybody is on the sort of the same path, okay, as over the next 2 weeks, because again, a lot will happen with the designer selection over the next couple of weeks, and we want to make sure that we're all in sync on that. And then we'll have comments from whoever would like to speak from the audience, and then hopefully adjourn about 9 o'clock. It's a busy day. It'll be busy all over town. So with that, we'll get started. And I think Matt is going to do the presentation.
Yes.
Matt?
Yep.
And again, what we're doing here, just from context from the bigger picture, we are going to be making a whole series of decisions through the next 3 months related to sustainability and sustainability aspects of the project. Our goal with this presentation, well, fortunately we have some extraordinary people who know a great deal about sustainability and its impact on buildings, and particularly school buildings, with us. And what we've asked them to do is help all of us understand these issues a little better, okay, in a little more depth, so we have the context to approach these issues when they come at us in the line of fire, if you will, okay? When we're faced with design decisions, we have a context of sustainability and a sustainability and payback and all of those things when we approach them. So they've been kind enough to put together a presentation, and with that, I'll turn it over to Matt.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah,
Say something real quick first, Kate.
and before Matt gets started, I just wanted to be sure that we said thank you to Tim and Dawn and the committee for giving us this time. It is a really busy time, so we appreciate having 45 minutes to talk about sustainability with you all. And as Tim said, there's been a lot of talk about sustainability, a lot of terms and concepts, and our hope is that after this meeting, everyone feels more informed and more confident that we can integrate these concepts into our new middle school. So I'll let Matt take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate. Yeah, thank you again to Tim and Lori and Dawn for this opportunity. I think Kate said it perfectly of how just talking about these issues. I guess I want to start. Please jump in with any questions that you have. There are absolutely no dumb questions. If you have a question, I am sure that at least 3 other people at the table have the same question. So please jump in. But my goal here is really to, as Kate said, provide some context, help you walk out of here feeling more informed and just confident that we can build a high performance building here. So quickly, kind of where where we are, we as in Concord, through our political process, a little over 2 years ago, we approved Article 51 here, which sets some energy-related goals for the town. So 25% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2020, 100% carbon-free electricity by 2030, and then an 80% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2050. So that's kind of the backdrop here, is that our town has approved these goals, and that's going to set kind of the framework of what I want to talk to you about today. So sustainability is a broad term, right? And within the context of buildings, there's a lot of aspects to sustainability, from water management to landscaping to construction waste to chemicals of concern. There is a whole wide range of issues. Given the town's approval on energy-specific goals, I kind of want to focus on those today. So that's really what we're going to be talking about. And sorry, I actually dove right into it. I wanted to quickly preface. So I have been working as a sustainability consultant for 15 years now in the construction industry. I was very fortunate to start with a firm where we were trained in both mechanical engineering as well as enclosure consulting. So that's somewhat unique in the industry. Usually you're either a mechanical expert or an enclosure expert, and you focus on either of those. But I ended up at a place where we did both, and it was a great experience, and I learned a lot. I have moved on from there since, and for the past 2 years I focused mostly on material selection and healthier materials for projects. But I spent the bulk of my career kind of doing energy efficiency, high performance buildings, and what we're going to talk about today. So these are the energy goals. The subcommittee hasn't voted and approved on these necessarily, but these are what we've been discussing and kind of focusing on to date. And I would argue that these are in order of importance, and we can debate the bottom of the list there. But these are roughly in order of importance, and healthy indoor air quality is of course at the top. We want this to be a healthy school for the students, the teachers, the workers, anybody who comes into the building. And we also want to ignite kind of a passion and excitement for the students through using this building as a living lab to help educate them about the environment, about the world, how math can be used in the real world, items like that. So I'm going to cover those first two. I'm going to dive into the bottom four in more detail later. So I'm just going to leave them there. But that's what we'll be talking about for the rest of the morning here for my time. So before I really get into it, I want to address that I've heard a couple comments about how there seems to be an overemphasis or an overfocus on sustainability. And there's all this talk about sustainability, and what about other aspects of the school? And I guess my response to that is that it's an absolute given that this is going to be a 21st century school. That's the base expectation, that this is a fantastic facility for our children. So that's not in debate. I would also argue that the expectation is that this is a beautiful school. And I, as the energy geek, still want it to be a beautiful building, because people love and take care of People love and take care of beautiful buildings. So it is a given that it's going to be a 21st century educational facility. It's a given that it's going to be a beautiful school. I would say we need the emphasis on sustainability, because that is not necessarily a given. It requires additional effort. It requires attention to detail. It requires extra design time, extra focus, and there are lots of examples in the past of projects that didn't quite take it to the full extent. And we've learned those lessons and we know how to do it better. But it requires focus, and that's why there has been so much talk about sustainability. And I would go on to also say that the community, right, has approved the Article 51, and so there is an expectation by the community that we are going to put the effort in to make this a sustainable school, and that we also owe this to our kids, because they are the ones who are going to inherit the earth that we are leaving behind for them. But the beauty of this is that it's not just energy efficiency. It is all of these other things that we are talking about. So along with lower operating costs and reducing the amount of therms or kilowatt hours that we're using, there's all these other reasons why we should be doing high performance. And I struck out sustainability. I know I used it for the first couple slides. I want to reorient you and get you thinking about high performance, okay? Because that's really what we're talking about here. We're making not just lower operating costs building here, right? That's at the bottom of the list. But we're focusing on indoor air quality. We're focusing on making a space that is conducive to maximizing the opportunity for learning. So a quiet space, a comfortable space temperature-wise, a building that is better from a durability perspective, so that Russ and his team don't have to worry about maintenance and costs and upkeep. A flexibility space for the future. What is education going to look like? How can we change the spaces around to as thinking evolves and new ideas and technology become available? So it's not just energy efficiency. Building performance affects all of these other items, and I could go on with each of these for 15 minutes. But does anybody know who this is?
Roger Bannister.
Sir Roger Bannister, very good, Chris. So this is the first known person to run a sub 4-minute mile. And at the time, there were lots of doubters about whether this could be done. There were doctors saying that he would die. There was just concern that this was beyond the limit of human capacity. But what's really awesome about Roger Bannister and his story is that once he achieved this goal that many thought was unattainable, just 46 days later, there was another person who did the same thing. Because he was inspired to do it by Roger Bannister kind of breaking through that barrier. And at this point, thousands of people have done it. The record is 3 minutes and 43 seconds. But what I want to communicate to you is that this project is not Roger Bannister. We are not the first project to do this. Okay, this is a public, this is the Fish and Wildlife Building in Westborough, Massachusetts, just 35 minutes down the road. This was built in 2014. It is a beautiful building. It is an amazing space to be inside. They have a brook running through the middle of the building with trout in it, because that's relevant to their building and what they do.
Fishing class at the I know. Okay, can we add that to our charter list, please?
I think that was an expensive add-on.
Kids would love
I know.
So
Fishing.
this building had trouble opening up. It is now net zero energy. It didn't start that way. It had some challenges, but I say that as an industry, have learned from that. And so this project will not be Roger Bannister. If you look at your handout here, Kate has done an awesome job of pulling together a number of steps, but on the first kind of page, there is an organization called the New Building Institute that tracks net zero energy buildings. And they started tracking buildings back in 2012. So this is not new stuff. We again, as the industry, have learned a lot and know how to do this better, faster, less expensive. So before I am going to get into some technical details, but I also want to just kind of set the context a little bit more here. So one concept that I really want to hammer home is that sustainability or high performance is not just kind of a separate item that gets glommed on at the end. It really has to be involved in the process from day one and thought of holistically as we move forward in the design process. And so as an example, I know that and fully appreciate that on budget or on schedule and on budget is a key. I've already feel like I have lost sleep over the fact that we are going to spend millions of dollars of taxpayer money. So, but the importance of involving high performance attributes from the beginning and setting that expectation with the design team that we are soon to select is absolutely critical. So this is, I don't know what project this is, but this is clearly a school building. You can see this is engineered wood structure. All of our school buildings, right, are built out of steel and concrete. There is, I'm going to get into embodied carbon in a few minutes here, but from an environmental perspective, there are a lot of benefits to using an engineered wood structure. I'm bringing it up now because the rule of thumb is that engineered wood typically takes about 25% faster to erect the superstructure compared to the standard steel and concrete. So is this a sustainability measure, or is this we want to get into our school in 2022, beginning of 2023, rather than September of 2023? So there are a lot of examples like this where there are synergies and opportunities where the higher performance option will benefit all of these other goals that we are trying to achieve.
Matt,
Yes,
is it okay to jump in with a question on this?
Please, thank you.
So the concept of this engineered wood, I'll say right up front, my bias is I see this and I feel like, warm feeling, it's wonderful,
Yep.
this is fabulous, I would love to do it.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
There must be a reason though that we've been using steel and concrete for a long time, and we're talking sustainability, so I'm assuming you're gonna tell us this is sustainable, but what are we talking about in terms of strength and durability and sustainability of the building, and could it be 100-year building if we're building out of materials like that? What's that comparison?
So yes to all of your, but thank you for jumping in and giving me a question. All of that is equivalent. I mean, I don't know the history of why we started out with steel and concrete. I'm sure there's
It's pretty simple, actually. It's just fire, really. When you go to the history of buildings, wood burns.
Right.
Okay.
Just real quick.
Yep.
It's been a shift in the industry to realize that the engineered product can be made such that it is sufficiently resistive with all the other systems, but there is still that, we all get it. Steel doesn't burn,
Right.
but it can melt.
Right.
But, from iron to steel and so forth. So we're moving back to something like this. And just for the longevity of it, go around New England, a well-built post and beam barn, be standing since the 1700s.
Right.
It's all wood.
But if you have a fire, you have a mess. That's what I'm gonna tell you, because that, you will replace it all, because,
Right.
I mean, there's very, very little chance that it's gonna sustain a fire,
Yeah, we've had fires.
if you have a fire in the school.
But
That's the down.
we digress, I don't know how hijack.
Yeah,
But the systems are such that, the industry and certainly the state boards are realizing you can put in sufficient engineered safety measures to deal with fire, and that's been accepted by Department of Fire Services and so forth.
Right.
But we're evolving that.
And thank you, Chris. I mean, I want to emphasize this. I am not advocating for a building that is safe and prone to fire. Right? This is the reason why we are moving back to this strategy is that it has been proven through fire testing that this is a safe application and we can do this correctly. And there are structures now, there are actually wood skyscraper buildings that are going up now.
So the message is pretty simple, and that is that wood is not something we have to avoid. That's what I'm
Correct.
hearing.
Yes, thank you, Corey.
So our mindset doesn't have to be steel only.
Correct.
At this
Yes,
stage,
yes, thank you. And I'm
yeah.
just trying, that's, my goal here is to start to get some concepts onto the table and start to get people thinking about it. I'm gonna loop back to the value from an environmental perspective in a moment. The other thing I'll just say about fire, so, fire recently, I forget when it was, but there was the fire in England, in London, 5 or 6 years
The
ago.
envelope that went up?
Right.
Yeah.
That was not a wood framed building, that was steel and concrete, and they had a massive fire that has drastically changed the industry. That came about because of the exterior envelope was covered in a foam plastic and the foam plastic combusted. But so even steel and concrete isn't going to, still has problems because of all the other materials that we use within our building.
Right.
And there's charring that happens with wood. There's sprinkler systems, there's other safety measures that we can do to make
And
this
that building,
safe.
by the way, was built according to standards far below the standards and the requirements in this country.
Right.
So,
But-
not to beat
but-
up
but
on
it has had
our
a
friends
massive-
in the UK, but nobody in this country would ever,
Right.
in like the last 30, 40 years, would ever build a building that way.
Right, but it has drastically changed even the way that we still operate and how we apply our standards today.
I just want to make sure, for the people watching this, there are no implied conclusions with this presentation, okay?
Yep.
What we're trying to do is understand right now, okay? Because this is one of many areas we're going to be introduced to
Yep.
in terms of new technologies, and we want to understand what they are. So we're
Yep.
not, this isn't a presentation of this is the way the building is going to be built, okay? This is a presentation of these are options, and we want to understand them.
Thank you, Tim. And I would say new old technologies, right?
Matt,
For-
sorry,
Yes,
one more
please,
question.
Heather.
I know that price tags and everything are a long way away in terms of all the details and a lot feeds into this. However, at a very base level, if you were just
Yeah.
looking at steel and concrete frame versus engineered wood frame, is one more or less expensive than the other?
So I this is where I'm not a structural guy, and so I don't have those numbers.
Okay.
I have to assume that in some cases wood is more expensive. I mean,
Okay.
the classic building science answer to everything is it depends.
Right.
It depends on so many factors that
Okay,
are
that's fair,
specific to our
yep.
one project. So I guess I'm going to talk budget right now. I'm
Okay.
not going to talk necessarily about structures because I just don't know. I haven't seen enough
Totally
costs
fine.
associated with that.
Okay.
So on schedule and on budget, right? The traditional strategy within the high performance building industry is you spend less money on mechanical systems, you spend more money on your enclosure. They don't necessarily equal out, but it's not as expensive as kind of everybody fears because there are all of these trade-offs. And it goes beyond just buying smaller mechanical systems. Once we have super low energy loads, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, we can start to downsize the mechanical system, so we're buying smaller systems. We can size the ductwork smaller. We can size the structure that has to support those mechanical systems smaller. So there are all these knock-on effects. I will highlight that one of our RFS responders, who we are interviewing next week, specifically mentioned in their RFS response how they have done a life cycle cost analysis for an all-electric net zero energy project that they are working on, and they found a 0.3% premium.
Three tenths.
When you say life cycle
Correct.
cost, just briefly, what does that mean?
So that is looking at not just upfront costs,
Right,
that is
yeah.
looking at operational costs,
And what kind of
And
timeframes do they?
replacement costs, maintenance costs, so over the life of, and I don't know if they're, what time span they're looking at, but presumably 30, maybe even 50-year timeframes.
And by a 0.3 premium, you're saying that the investment up front was minimal.
Correct, yeah, that, thank you, that's the concept that, and Kate has, in her handout here, she
I don't think so.
references.
I think that's the net of the
Yeah, I
present
wanna be
value
clear.
of all the savings from the future with the investments that are required.
Yes, I'm sorry, you're right, I'm sorry, thank you, I was jumping to my next idea already.
So give it to us again.
So this is a 3% premium on the life cycle, so looking at a life cycle cost, so 30 years, I don't know how long the time frame is, but over the course, not just kind of day one expenditures, but 30 or 50 years, including the operational costs and the maintenance costs to operate that system. How much more is it going to cost
Thank you.
to run the building?
So it includes cost of capital and all of the operational costs
Yes,
throughout a 30-year period.
yes.
And
I
that,
mean, we
just
can
to,
ask them more details on it next week. This is the one line that they had. And
now, just to clarify the slide, I think
Yeah.
it says 0.3%, so significantly less than 1% premium.
Correct.
That's what the slide says. So it's not
Yes.
3%, it's 0.3%.
Right,
Yeah.
right, less than 1%.
But it makes the assumption of those savings.
Pardon me?
It makes the assumption of those savings over a period
Of
of time.
operations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the
Yeah.
investments are pretty clear.
So a lot of the discussion is, oh, it's 4%, 5%, whatever, 10%. This is 0.3%, so.
Well, and this,
different.
but this again is one designer that
Yeah.
presented this thing. I just as an aside, Kate,
Yeah.
in our finance, our committee, I asked Kate, anything, my guess is that these industries are doing a lot of research on this very thing, and we can get studies that are much more than one designer saying this
Absolutely,
to us,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
anything that you can provide in terms of some documents that show us a range of buildings that address this issue, life cycle costs versus investments in sustainable engineering would be really helpful.
Yep.
And I put one in the handout, and I can share the electronic version that has a link to it.
Yeah, so Kate's referring to, in the handout here, there's a Massachusetts state-specific study that found 0 to 7% initial capital cost premium.
My
So it's different from the life cycle
original
cost.
perusal of the literature says somewhere between 2 and 8%
Yep.
is the premium in capital costs that you'll pay to get to very aggressive sustainability. And I don't want to spend I do not want to hijack this and make this
No,
thing right here,
no,
but
but-
that we're going to be constantly thinking of that as we go through this, right?
Again, I've lost sleep over spending money on this project, right? So I think it's an important point, and just to highlight, that range is large because there are so many factors that go into it, and how well does the design team do at incorporating them early on versus kind of adding them on after the fact at the end. And if they're embedded, then it is a lower expense. There's also just lots of decisions that project teams make that, well, there's a cost to that. Are we going to what are we associating that cost to? So just quickly, and I want to move on. This is the Galvin School that we visited in Wakefield. I know nothing about the budget of this project. I do know that curtain wall, so you can see all this glazing here, this atrium setting and all this glazing here. Curtain wall, which is what those big multi-story glass windows are called, cost a lot more than brick buildings. So that somebody decided that we're gonna spend the money on all of the curtain wall for this project. Curtain wall is less efficient. That was not an energy efficient driven design. That was an aesthetically driven design. Again, I want this building to be beautiful, but there are also all of those decisions that we as a committee are going to help the designer make in terms of where we're spending our money. I feel like I'm going slow here, so I'm gonna pick up the pace. All that said,
Break the 4-minute mile.
thank you. Indoor air quality does cost more. This is a traditional system where we've got ventilation coming down, being supplied here, and it gets exhausted here. If we look at a system that, again, will focus on indoor air quality, where the ventilation air is brought in low and then exhausted high, that costs more. That is a more expensive system. We have separate ductwork, but my understanding is that we've already done this. Sorry that's a dark picture, but I was at Willard yesterday with my son, who's a 4th grader. This is his Spanish class, and we've done displacement ventilation, which is what that's called at Willard. All right, super energy efficiency. I'm going to quickly try and go through those four steps. There's been a lot of talk about EUI, energy use intensity. This is a pie chart from a local school that is being built right now. You can see they've done a good job of reducing their heating and cooling load. It's less than 25% of this pie. But I cannot overemphasize the fact that energy efficiency is the primary goal. Should be our first step in how we approach the design of this building. It is absolutely the one thing that we can affect now and have more challenge changing in the future. So the number one step should be energy efficiency, and I'm gonna start to define what super can be in a few slides here. But we want to shrink that pie, right? We want to make that the amount of energy that this project has to use smaller.
Does this say that what this slide says is those items around that circle, this is the relative percentage?
That's the percentage of energy. Correct. Okay. Yep. So heating and cooling, they've done a good job of reducing the loads. That uses less than 25%. I mean, you can see that plug loads in our school buildings are in all buildings are becoming a very big part of the pie, because we plug in all of our computers and our iPhones and our iPads and our photocopiers and our coffee machines and everything. So we do start to worry about those more and more as we've driven the other loads down. But still, we want to focus on making these loads as small as possible, because we know how to do that. So I mentioned embodied carbon with the engineered wood structure. So just quickly, greenhouse gases. The most prevalent greenhouse gas is CO2. The shorthand that the industry has used is that we look at equivalent carbon dioxide emissions associated with the production of a product. So any product requires energy. It requires energy to extract it and then it requires energy to manufacture it. It requires energy to transport it to the job site, and then it requires energy to install it. So for products, major products, calculations have been done where they add up all of that work and all of that energy that was required to make that product, and they equate it to a greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide. Steel is one of the most intensive products that we use. The production of 1 ton of steel emits roughly 2 tons equivalent of carbon dioxide, greenhouse gas. Similarly, cement is about 1 ton. For cement is 1 ton of greenhouse gases. So these are significant amounts of greenhouse gas associated with the production of those materials. Why engineered wood is so valuable is that actually engineered wood is what is called a carbon sink. So instead of emitting carbon dioxide, trees absorb carbon dioxide to grow, and then they store it in their wood structure. So it's would have a negative embodied carbon. I'm bringing this up because as we focus on making a super energy efficient building, the embodied carbon becomes a bigger part of that pie. And so that's why we want to start to look at strategies of how to reduce the embodied carbon for the building of the project. Questions?
So
Okay.
when you talk about that, this is an expense this is a energy use that has already occurred in the material.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Exactly. This
Yeah,
is
okay,
like
it's not-
day one, okay, before any of the systems have even been turned on and we've started to use energy to operate the building. There is a set amount of greenhouse gases that have been emitted in the production of that building. And the big kind of my industries, the high performance industry, has really been focusing really well on this part of the pie for years now. And we've gotten really good at driving down the loads and making really efficient buildings. But this is a fixed amount. And we're stuck with that amount that we can't do anything in terms of operating the building to affect that. Because all of those have been baked into the pie on day one. Court, please.
Am I correct in thinking operational is a return that continues and embodied is a one-time benefit?
Yes.
Which is not to minimize the
Right,
embodied.
yes,
but
no,
it's- they're
that's
different-
absolutely true.
Different measurement scales.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. The third on our list here is all electric. So why do we have to do all electric? The value of an all electric building is that electricity is the one renewable energy resource that we have. So once we burn a fossil fuel, it's gone. It's released all of its greenhouse gases. We don't have the technology right now to capture those back. So all electric allows us to operate the building, and then if our energy comes from a renewable resource, that can happen in a sustainable manner going forward. So what does that mean? If we have an all electric building, we will use a heat pump technology. I'm going to talk about heat pumps in a second here, but because I know heat pumps kind of sound like a scary word. Your refrigerator is a heat pump. Everybody has a heat pump in their house right now. A heat pump is just saying that it is moving heat from one space to another. Okay, in the case of a refrigerator, we're moving heat from inside the refrigerator to outside the refrigerator. There are two main options of heat pumps that we have, that the mechanical engineer has within their design options. There are air source heat pumps and there are ground source heat pumps. I'm gonna get a jar, and I want everybody to put a nickel in the jar every time somebody says geothermal, okay? I know there's the ground source heat pump industry thinks geothermal sounds way cooler, that they have advocated, they've pushed this confusion. Geothermal is what Iceland does, where they're tapping into the volcanic heat in the ground. We're doing ground source heat pumps here. We're just going a few hundred feet underground. We're not going down to the Earth's core. But the basic technology is just that we are taking heat from a reservoir in the winter and then moving it in the building during our winter. And in the summer, we're taking the heat out of the building and dumping it into that reservoir. And the reservoir can be either the air, when it's an air source heat pump, or the ground, when it's a ground source heat pump. So with the ground source heat pump, we've got all of these tubes going down to allow for the heat exchange to occur with the reservoir. Air source heat pumps, they may or may not have a bad rap in your mind. There were a lot of bad technology in the 80s and 90s that was used. This is technology that is coming from Japan over 10 years ago and is amazing. when it's 0 degrees out, it can still pull heat out of that cold air. The refrigerants in this system are operating at negative 150 degrees, so they can still pull heat out of really cold temperatures and not lose what's called capacity. Is everybody with me? Like, okay, all right. So 4-step, and this is at the bottom, is solar ready, because we can always add solar to the building. We are not going to go back and rebuild the wall. That's why energy efficiency is the #1 and primary step, is we want to focus on energy efficiency first because we can always do solar later. That said, we want to make the solar, the ability to add solar as easy as possible. And so we want to orient the roof appropriately. We want to have nice big open spaces. We don't want mechanical systems or plumbing penetrations on the roof. We want a conduit that goes down to the electric room so that we can transfer the energy down. There are lots of steps that we can take to make the project solar ready. And I think many of our hopes is that there will be solar on this project, but at least we want to focus on making it solar ready. So just a few more quick slides here. How do we get there, right? We kind of know that we want a high performing building. What's the steps to get there? Most people have heard of LEED. LEED has taken its lumps in my little sector of the industry. I think that the USGBC, the governing body that started LEED, deserves a lot of credit for some of the things that it has done. But the unfortunate reality is that within commercial buildings, LEED has become, the LEED certification program has very much become a box checking exercise. And even within the context of what I've talked about today and what the town has set our goals on, energy efficiency, LEED is just one, energy efficiency is just kind of one aspect of LEED. So you can see here, it covers all of these sections. There are different credits within the different sections. Energy efficiency is the biggest one. But that also deals with just like you get credit if you have sub-metering in your building. You get credit if you buy renewable energy. You get credit for commissioning, which, in my opinion, we should follow the LEED commissioning guidelines. So there is a lot of good stuff. I don't think, and we're starting to get into my personal opinion and not what the sustainability subcommittee has approved and recommended. But I don't think that this is necessarily going to get us to kind of where we want to go. What I do think, and I know I've articulated this before, and this is kind of my professional opinion here, but that Passivhaus will put us on that path, because we know that we want the net zero energy ready. We overwhelmingly approved an amendment regarding that. That is an endpoint, and what the Passivhaus program does is it provides a series of steps and guidelines in order to get us to that endpoint. So it has very specific metrics, very specific pass-fail requirements that guide the design team and will, if they take all of those steps, will get us to an energy efficient building. So they have requirements on shading, they have requirements on air tightness, they have requirements on thermal bridging. There are all of these things that design teams have to do in order to comply with the program standard. Now, are we gonna get certified? I don't know, but I would at least strongly advocate that we start along that path and see where it takes us. Any questions on Passivhaus quickly?
I don't know if you just want to frame public schools and how,
Th-
where this is
yeah,
at.
Thank you. So
there.
teeing
Nice
me up,
segue
Laura,
for you.
you're planting. Okay, so this is the kind of Passivhaus is enjoying a little bit of a moment here. I think because a lot of people realize the value of it and how it can help projects get to where they want to go. 2019 here, you can see they are projecting to have about 4.5 million square feet of project space that is either certified or has pre-certified, kind of registered with them to pursue it. So they have really, you can see the kind of exponential growth that has happened in the past couple of years. But this is we are not Roger Bannister, right? This is a program that is in its third version of its certification, and it has gone through the process of kind of optimizing its requirements with the sweet spot of cost yet performance. So yes, there are steps that we will take that will cost a little bit more, but they have optimized that value for the project
If you,
over
on that
again the
scale,
life
just
cycle.
a question there, if you take that scale on the left,
Yep.
do you have any sense of what percentage that scale is of total buildings being built?
Oh, it's small. I have
1%?
Under that, yeah. It's tiny.
And no public schools so far, right?
No public schools, but so you're still teeing me up here, Lori. So,
I've seen, I know, we've spent too much time together on this project.
so no public schools, but there have been a few private schools, and there are these two projects in Chicago that are now. So the one on the top left and the one on the bottom right are complete, and then the other two corners, these are projects that are going. So and I would argue that the Passivhaus certification is focused on the enclosure and making sure that there is a rigorous design and then a commissioning of that enclosure. The program space matters less. Like, it doesn't matter, is this a school building? Is this a multifamily building? Is this an office space? What's happening in the building definitely matters from a design perspective in terms of how we use that building, but the actual wall assembly doesn't really care. It's still just trying to separate the inside from the outside. And that's what Passivhaus is focusing. So how do we get there? If I can wrap it up here, I know we've talked about goals. We need to continue to set strong and aggressive goals. We want to pick a design team that will achieve the goals that we want to achieve. I have been on lots of different projects, and the success of a project is strongly related to the leadership that is demonstrated by the owner and by the client in that project. So they don't need to be an expert on energy efficiency. They just need to help set clear goals so that the design team knows where they have to get. I think that third-party verification or certification can help provide those guideposts and set that goal to get us there. And then using not just kind of first costs, but lower cost life cycle. Questions?
You talk about third-party certification.
Yes.
How would it actually work? Let's take Passivhaus, for example. Would we rely on a design team to have that interface with
Yes.
Passivhaus, or would owner own that relationship?
Most of the programs rely, the design team either will have an in-house expert or have a sub-consultant who will specialize in whatever the certification is and will coordinate that and do all of that work. So that's where, like, we don't have to become the experts on it. We have to pick what our target is and communicate that to the design team, and then they will.
So Concord's leadership is indirect in this particular sense.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Can you help me with some metrics? I mean, you've talked about some metrics in earlier meetings.
Yep.
And then when we get to goals, what are metrics that we will hear, and what do they mean?
So there
I know
are.
that's a general question.
Yeah,
but
no,
I
but
don't
it's a-
know.
it-
You know, I hear things like leads, platinum, lead this, lead that, okay.
Right.
I hear numbers, 25.
Yeah,
okay,
yep.
What, talk a little bit about.
There are, so there are a whole wide range of metrics, and I think that's where we need to, we wanna make it somewhat easier on ourselves of like what we choose to focus on. Within Passivhaus, there are a slew of metrics in terms of air tightness that needs to be done, energy modeling that needs to be done. But we don't have to get into the weeds on all of that if we choose the metric is just achieve Passivhaus. So I think that metrics are absolutely critical to the success. It's how do we want to leverage them to achieve our goals. And they get really technical and really down into the weeds really quickly. It's kind of demonstrated by energy use intensity in the EUI. And I'm sorry, I'm realizing now that I kind of breezed over that one quickly, but the idea of the EUI is that you take all of the energy that the building uses and you divide it by the square footage.
Right.
So that then you can compare the middle school versus the high school versus town hall versus your house. But even within those different buildings, there's different energy use. I mean, Frank just worked on the Minuteman Tech. Tech schools use a lot more energy than the Concord middle
So tell me
schools.
about that again. What the range is what? I mean, what is that?
Yeah, so we put that one in the slide or in the handout here because I didn't want to get too bogged down on that. But
I don't want to either, but that's
but
one
I
that
think
we
it's really
use
important.
a lot.
It does get used a lot. So I do want to make sure that everyone's kind of comfortable with EUI and energy use intensity. So we're on page 2 here, and it's got this bar chart, and you can see the buildings, and you can see their use, and we're in Ripley here, which is not faring well. Right, it's an old building, and it uses a lot.
Quick,
of
turn the
energy.
lights off.
We have a lot of energy right here.
Right. So, but because it's based on per square foot, we can compare the different building types. And so Kate has done a great job of kind of indicating, she's got these dashed lines for like the standard new Massachusetts K-12 school is 45, right? And the number we've been talking about is 25. So significantly below that 45.
Kind of picking up on Tim's point, on the various levels of certification and LEED, and then looking at Passivhaus, would it be fair to say that if you were to meet the best of Passivhaus, you'd yield a lower EUI, or more likely to, than, for example, LEED silver, LEED gold, LEED
Absolutely.
platinum? So
Absolutely.
people can start to think about terms that are out there now, and ultimately, where do you end up?
Right, because if you think about that, that's where I'm saying LEED is a tough one if we're really just focusing on energy efficiency. Now I've broken it. Because it could be LEED platinum, now I'm gonna go through all this. There are other ways. You could be LEED gold, but do really poorly on energy because you've done really well in the other categories. And there's a minimum requirement, but it's a pretty low bar.
And to your point, depending on the use of the building, you can't avoid that. To pick up on the tech building,
Yep.
inherently is going to have to use more energy because of its program than
Right.
a middle school building.
Right, so what LEED does to address that, tell me if I'm getting too far in the weeds, but how LEED looks at energy efficiency is it compares a reference building. So for in our tech school example, it takes another reference tech school, has that as the baseline, and then compares what the design is for the new tech school. And you get a certain number of credits based on how much better you are than that baseline. So it's only looking at tech schools
Right.
in order to calculate that. Now that that has value and a place, but it still is limiting in terms of it doesn't drive as far towards efficiency as I think the town is expecting us to go.
So one of the things I've seen, I think this was Lexington, they set a goal saying we want to achieve a certain level of LEED, and specifically we want every single one of the energy and atmospheric credits to kind of address that, balance that you can pick and choose. They say we will pick and choose, but we are not gonna not do these. So that's one way
Right.
that some have addressed that.
But and just to pick up on that, again, that's an endpoint. That's saying we want this much efficiency. It doesn't give the guide rails to the design team of how to get there. And that's the value of Passivhaus, is it's saying, look, you have to do this type of window. You have to achieve this type of air infiltration. You have to have this much efficiency in your ventilation system. So if we were to do Passivhaus, nobody could fault us for going as hard at energy efficiency.
This is kind of a silly point, I apologize.
No,
The
please.
house, is the passive house become a trademark, a term of art versus somebody saying, because as you know, downtown Boston is gonna build a passive office building
Yep.
with the concepts, but I don't know, just for the layperson, you see
The-
the house and your mind says, oh, great, I can make my passive solar single or two-family house. How does that relate
Right.
to our school building?
It's unfortunate terminology. I think they're gonna stick with it at this point, but it's
And having
unfortunate
spelled
that
both
the house.
the German way and the American way too.
Right, right.
Okay.
Well, there's a
So-
schism there, but
Yeah.
we
I'm
don't
just
wanna get
gonna
into
say
that.
that there are standards that apply to ZNE, or zero net energy buildings. There are standards for energy use. Let's not use energy use intensity, let's just use energy use. And the per square foot numbers are quite low. They're in the one that we talked about, 25, is right in pretty much in the sweet spot. Although, one of the recommendations is 20 for our region, 19 to 20. Now, if you do the computations on the statistics or the energy use numbers that come out, to your point, that come out of Passivhaus, they're quite low. They have numbers as well. And to your, coming back to the notion that we need to choose which one we're going to focus on, but Passivhaus has energy use standards built in that are similar. They're also by square foot. Now, do they measure exactly the same things? Well, maybe not, but to do efficiency and to do net zero and so forth, you have to have relatively low to everybody else, relatively low energy use. And the point is that it's doable. It's doable with conventional materials. It's not rocket science.
Let me ask one question, and this may be difficult at this point, but if you look at the range of designers that we are looking at,
Yep.
my assumption is that every one of those designers would have done multiple LEED buildings in many different ways, right?
Yes.
Would they have a similar level of familiarity with Passivhaus?
With Passivhaus, no, probably not. I mean, I think so. In looking, I think it's something that we'll want to get into in the interview. There are two firms that have hired specific Passivhaus, not hired. They have included specific Passivhaus consultants within their submission. So there are two firms that have really kind of targeted that. There is multiple firms, and this is where I don't have them all at the top of my head, but of the 5 that we are looking at, I think that at least 3, if not 4, have mentioned Passivhaus in their
And
submission.
when you do this, is this one way or the other? I mean, are you going through a LEED program or a passive house, or are you selecting what you think is the excellent concepts from either and applying it to your project?
That's a great question, Tim. I mean, that drives kind of at the heart of it, of like, do we really need to use a certification program? Can we pick and choose the thing that's appropriate for us? That gets more difficult and more tricky, and I guess I'm
not advocating for that.
No,
I'm just
I
trying to
know,
understand.
I know, but my stock answer to that is I think we want to keep it more simple for ourselves, and it's just easier to know certification. I've worked in certification programs for 15 years. None of them are perfect. None of them have exactly everything that we want for a specific job. But the trade-off is that which one is kind of close enough and has most of what we want. And rather than, because the alternative is to like go through and pick out what are the 7 LEED credits that we really care about, and then what are the 3 passive house things that we care about, what are the 6 well building standard things that we care about. That's a lot of time and effort. It gets really confusing. So these organizations, these are all run by nonprofit organizations, and they have done all of the work kind of to package it for us. Now, they were consensus driven, and there was a community that came together and everybody wanted their own little piece into it. So they're not perfect, but it's like,
Right.
the hierarchy of.
So it sounds like you say you do choose one. You choose a framework?
I think you do, and then maybe there are a few spots where you pick out some things. Like, again, I mean, LEED has been a pioneer on advocating for commissioning. And I'll say specifically mechanical commissioning, because they have a great standard on how. Let me back up. So mechanical systems, right? Typically, when they get installed and first get turned on, they don't operate the way they're supposed to in these larger buildings.
No.
And so commissioning is the process of going through and making sure that mechanical system is operating the way that it's supposed to, and achieving the efficiency and the performance that the design team expected out of it. LEED has done an awesome job on mechanical commissioning. They've missed the boat on enclosure commissioning.
And we have maybe a couple more minutes here,
Yeah.
so any big questions
Well,
that people
just-
want to ask?
Just for information, the trade school opened in September, and we're in the punch list.
Right.
Okay? And the punch list probably will go through this month, November, before it's done.
That would be good if you were done.
That's fast.
Considered there was 2,500 things on it, yeah. But,
Do they still call it the trade school?
yeah. And another thing, the trade school operates from 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, 5 days a week,
Right.
and weekends. Now, this school, we're going to have to come out for the design team, when you're operating this school, at what? I mean, are you gonna operate it you're gonna set the parameters for at night operation every 5 days a week? Or what are you going to do with this? And you have to tell this guy that's gonna design it, just what's really, it has to be designed for.
Mhm.
So that's one point we haven't even started on.
Yeah, well, this is a big topic, and this was a really good start. Any other quick comments here? Thank you guys for doing this. This was
Yeah.
Tim,
Yeah, I just want to comment that this was fabulous for me, and thank you very much. And I'm thinking in terms of how we're communicating as we go through this. And I'm not even sure I can articulate this, but I think it's going to be very important that we are able to talk about the value of passive or sustainable to the health of the children in the building,
Absolutely.
the health and well-being of the teachers in the building, the cost savings, the contributions to preserving the environment. I think that we want to be able to clearly articulate those buckets.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate this.
Absolutely, but and I'll just hasten to say though, Pat, is that we don't want them to be seen as kind of separate items, that they are all intertwined in terms of our schedule, the educational opportunities. I've got you know, my little, we're not gonna get to it, but I have a little, like, when I used to do some presentations to kids, I have a little experiment about energy efficiency. But so bringing it to having it be a living lab and an opportunity for the kids.
We probably wouldn't understand him as early as they would. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you, Matt.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
Justin.
just, you know, I want to thank you for thinking and having included in your presentation how the school can really inform the science curriculum, the health curriculum, and all of that, which is, I think, the charge of this group as well. Love just to close my eyes and picture the kids, you know, walking, doing a tour of the building, and again, you know, that synergy with, you know, those different curriculums. I do wonder from, you know, getting the message out, so we have some public here, you know, I think we always need to remind ourselves that we're, you know, dealing with acute inefficiencies having two buildings. I'm always asked if we're still looking at building a sixth grade campus, especially how we just reconfigured the middle school and re-looking at it.
Right.
So I'm not sure if the math is as simple as this, but combining the Sanborn and Peabody EUI, you know, and looking at that combined number and bringing it down to your goal, you know, of about 25 to really just double down on, again, the fact that we're looking to bring two buildings into one. You know, that talks about the inefficiencies environmentally, fiscally, all of that. Because I think that's really where, you know, this presentation and what we're trying to do really pops with the community.
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely, you can do that. You can add these two, the two bars here together, because it is based on actual energy use.
Yeah.
And so this much amount of energy is going into both the, I mean, and you don't add them and say that it's, you guys are gonna make me do quick math here, right? Where's
Well, you can average
Sanborn,
them. You can
right?
average them
Yeah,
per
you
square
don't
foot.
you don't say that it's 200. It doesn't work. You don't add those. You add the
per
amount of
square foot.
energy used, but you could average
Average them,
them. I mean, you'd have to, and Kate has worked backwards from this, but you would multiply each of these numbers, Sanborn 135 times the square footage in the building, and that's that amount of energy.
I don't want to
And
cut
then-
off this analysis, but.
Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry.
It's
All
fascinating.
science,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Think
I
that
have
about,
lots of data if you wanna dig
Yeah.
into it. On the first page, I did call out that the middle schools contributed 8% of the total municipal emissions. That gives you a sense of the
Yeah.
scale of
Yeah.
what
And
it is.
I want to emphasize for the people watching, we're in the start of a conversation, right? We wanted to get a little deeper knowledge about these issues and the alternatives before us, and you've done a great job with that. We haven't made conclusions, okay? We're gaining a context to make a set of decisions that are going to be made over the next several months, and and you moved that along very nicely today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt.
To switch gears a little bit now, and we want to talk about communications of this committee to the audiences that we need to communicate with. I'm sure you're going to address that. So Heather and Pat, you want to
Yes.
talk a little bit about communication?
There you go.
Okay, so we have some handouts. How many hands? I'm back this way and this way also. Keep one in front of each of us. Speaking of how we're getting things out to the public and everything, here we go, Justin, passing those around there. So fortunately, Matt took us through the complicated things requiring real thought. This is very simple compared to what he was just taking us through. I'll let her keep handing those out, but I'll just kind of jump in here. So weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago now, we all discussed subcommittees. I'll let everybody get in front of me. And Pat and I were assigned to communications. We wanted to this is just basically what you have in front of you. Obviously, it's a draft. It is a first draft of a communications plan for this committee. So as we've all noted in early discussions and in the charter, we want to make sure that this committee and its work is very transparent, clear to the public, and certainly taking input at relevant points so that it is the community's building, not just the building of the building committee. This is a first stab at how we would like to be open to the community and get information out there. And I apologize that I'm facing away from most people here, but I'll just kind of take us through. Unless, do you want to go through this? You don't need to.
You go ahead.
Okay. So I put this draft together. Pat and I have kind of combined some ideas, taken some interest from some people. I have the charge here. Our charge is that we're is to ensure that all of our activities and progress here are communicated out to the public. The communications plan consists of 5 primary components. So an online presence, proactive outreach, distribution of updates, use of social media, our liaison relationships, and then some actual public events. So I'm just gonna kind of take you through our ideas so far, high level, and then this is for discussion and input here. We would really like thoughts and input. So online presence will be in 2 different areas. The primary is a web page hosted by the school district on the school district page. This already exists, not with everything here yet, but a lot of it, most of it. We have welcome and any recent announcements, our committee charges there, and then there will be several sections on this page that's hosted within the district site. There's a page for committee members, the listing of all of our meetings and agendas, which will then have the minutes also, documents that we've created or looked at here. What's that?
Put it up?
Oh yeah, sure. That's right.
Keep talking.
That would be great. Okay. Thank you, Larry. I was sure I should have done that. Do you have it on there?
I'll do it on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any presentations? So for instance, this presentation that Matt just gave us can go up on the website. Excuse me. Building committee updates, which I'll get to in a second, in terms of how we'll have those. And a last section that we were talking about as an idea, and would love feedback on, is a resource section, which we just thought there are going to be a lot of things that we all will either be curious about, want to learn more about, or find interesting and may find as useful. Thank you. So here's the existing page right now. This does not have this section we're talking about as an idea, but a resource area where if we find interesting articles, links to informational sites that could be relevant to us, it could be information about educational philosophy, about energy efficiency, about MSBA updates, even if we're not working with them, just kind of building things. So that's an area that we've thought about that could be useful for everybody.
One of our thoughts is that we could present sort of neutral information. It wouldn't look in any way like an advocacy resources, but collecting other middle school projects, collecting, just anything that would be of interest. And I think that the discussion point here is how we make sure it doesn't cross over into any kind of sort of advocacy. That we don't appear slanted in the materials that we put forth on this. So
why-
that's something we.
Why, let's take an example. If you were presenting our goals, would that be slanted?
No, that wouldn't be. But if we were,
Okay.
so let's say that there's a really great passive school and middle school project going on someplace, or a private school passive project. I think we have to think about how that might be perceived, or I think it just is going to take more thought than just that's an interesting article, let's throw it up.
And I should have mentioned that. Court, I see you have a comment, but one thing quickly. Whoops. Thank you, Pat, for bringing that up, because I forgot to mention at the very beginning of this, whatever we do that uses school or town resources is purely informational. And that goes back to, that's regulations. We cannot use town money and resources to then advocate for a certain vote or a certain position. So all of this right here, everything we're going to look at, and I should have stated this at the beginning, thank you, is all about sharing information, not about advocacy. If there are other groups in town, if there are parents groups or residents groups who want to get together and advocate and do things like that, that's fine. But it cannot be us using town or school resources to advocate for anything. So all of this is 100% to ensure that what we're doing is accessible to the public and to make sure that we are putting everything out there and sharing all the information that we can. But it is not to advocate for, say, a specific vote at a town meeting. Is that clear? Just so that's
No,
clear.
got that.
And then, Court, you had a question or comment. I just want to clarify that first.
Well, Tim says about it, but I want to just clarify a little bit more. This would suggest then that this is not a repository for information that members of the public decide to request sit in this site, but rather information that this committee deems informational.
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
okay.
And I'll actually get to that in the process for how things get there. So yes, it would be things that we decide, oh, this is relevant to our discussion.
Thank you.
People might want to read this. We will post it. And it's not going to become an endless, this is not meant to be a huge, long, deep page of endless information. It would be just a few things that we think would be very helpful. We will also include a link to the Town of Concord's page, which is the second piece of this. This will be run by the Town Information Officer, Erin Stevens. And so this is not as much up to us. I just have a high-level list here. She is deciding exactly what will be on the town page, but it will link to our page, which I think is going to be more detailed and inclusive. But she will include, at this point, it looks like, the list of meetings and agendas, a bunch of the documents that we've finalized, a link back to us as well, so that people going to the town site first can get their basic information and then link over to the site that we're hosting that will presumably be a lot more detailed. The process, excuse me, for all of this, anything to be posted should be, and again, this is all recommended process, we can discuss it, but we're recommending anything to be posted should be approved by a communications subcommittee member, which is basically Pat or myself, or an executive committee member, one of the chairs or co-chairs or Lori. And Erin Higgins, Lori's assistant, will help us with all of the posting, actually getting it up there. She will also share documents and information with the town so that Erin Stevens can then post what she needs to on the town website. So process-wise, it will kind of funnel through us to Erin Higgins to get online. That's the tentative plan. Next piece is distribution of updates. I think this is really important in terms of the timely piece of this. We are lucky enough to have Tom Lucy, our PR guru who helps us, helps the school district with communications, sitting in on all of our meetings here, taking notes, and he will be writing updates after each of our meetings. These can then be used to share out. So he will write an update, which then either Pat or I will approve, that it has highlighted what we've been doing recently, what the milestones are. We will post that online. And then what we're looking at is sending that out, or sending out a link to that with headlines, kind of our news and latest goings on headlines that will go to a distribution list of many groups in town. The list you see here is kind of a starter list, and some of them are not even confirmed yet. So if anybody out there is looking at this and says, wait, that's my group on there, you haven't reached out to me yet, it's just because we haven't gotten to you yet. But the concept is that we will send these headlines to lots of groups in town, not just the schools, certainly school parents, but also trying to reach as many residents in town as we can with what's going on here. With a headline that can be included in their newsletters, if it's a group that has some type of a newsletter, with all of those headlines linking back to our update. So we have started to reach out to a bunch of these groups who have said, yes, great, thank you, include us. So that's a way that we're trying to reach everybody with these. Process-wise, again, Tom Lucy will write these updates and headlines. He'll send them to us for approval, and we will get them to Erin Higgins, who will send them out to this distribution list of groups.
So, will we see these?
Sorry?
We gotta look at it before it goes.
The updates.
Yes,
Yeah.
so the updates will go to both Pat and me as well as to you, Dawn and Lori, before they're finalized. So you'll see them early. and then the finalized ones will go to this whole group
So we'll
also.
try to turn around anything we got in a day.
Yes, exactly. We'll
Yeah.
turn it around quickly.
And I just wanna clarify, if it's not clear to anybody else, that I think everything that Heather and I are approving is also gonna filter through the executive committee, Lori and Tim and Dawn, so that it's not just the two of us, but
Right.
that we'll get your opinions and your,
Yeah, we just
Your
want a
sanctions.
quick look at it to
Yeah,
make sure.
yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
So if it made sense for us to create some content for these updates, we could do that and give it to you, we would give it to you. Would that be what we would do, or?
No, the content for the updates is Tom is going to be writing those. So
So he's gonna be doing all the content?
he's going to be doing all the content
So where does
creation.
he actually get that from then?
From listening to us,
Sitting in the
sitting
meeting.
right back here with us.
Well, okay.
And then we look at it.
And then we look at it, and we could always add. We could say, oh, we really want to highlight this or that. Let's add to this part of it. So he's doing it on behalf of us. So this is
I'm just
our
saying- I'm
direction
just
in
saying
terms of
that-
what we want to put
that,
into it.
You know, in some cases, it might make sense for some of us to write some of these pieces for you, because we know the material.
That's
So
I'm just saying, well, maybe, you know,
so that might be something that would go into the resource section. I think what we want to try to do for kind of consistency's sake is that everybody's getting the same information that is discussed in these meetings
Okay.
from the updates. That's really what the updates are for.
This is really what's happening.
This is what's
This
happening
is what's going
in
on.
these
Right.
meetings.
This isn't it.
oh, I see, okay.
Yeah.
This is-
Got it.
Right.
Yep. Okay, so that's that piece. The third piece is social media. Again, these updates are going to be kind of the base of everything that goes out, but we will also use social media as a form of outreach. Lori already tweets out and posts and everything on behalf of the schools. So these approved updates and headlines can be sent out through Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and then they will also go again to Erin Stevens on the town side. What's that?
I said it's gonna be like the president.
Yeah, Tim's equating me to a presidential tweet.
Oh, maybe not that much.
30 before 8 a.m.
Right, exactly.
Can I just
Yeah.
one other thing is that there will be, the minutes from all of these meetings will be posted. So the updates are different
Clearly.
from the minutes.
Yes,
They're-
yes.
They're bullets, they're
I'm
more readable,
keen
they're,
to get through.
but there will also, citizens will also have access to the minutes.
Of course.
Okay.
So we'll send those out through social media. Next is very simple, but liaison relationships. Obviously, some people here are liaisons back to committees that we represent, like the school committee, the select board. We also have other committees like the finance committee and the others, and sending liaisons here to hear our meetings. These updates can be shared with them to share with their committees. And we figured that this is what we'll use. So, for instance, when I and Court go back to the school committee, we can use these updates as our guideline for updating the school committee on what's going on. Susan can do that with the select board, et cetera, for all of the liaisons. And lastly, we will want to hold some public events over the course of this time. And I think they could take primarily two different forms. One can be a more relaxed update type of event, but just a coffee. You know, we can hold a coffee and come with our latest update in hand. And it's a time that people can come hear what's going on and ask questions if they, I guess, can't make it here at 7:30 to join us, and want to ask some quick questions. Kind of an informal, small group thing, a place where people can just stay up to date on what's going on. Separate from that, as we get into the actual design discussions here, we are going to want more public input. And I think at that point, we're going to want to look at larger scale public forums that are really meant to collect input on what the residents of this town want to see in this building that we will all be building.
I expect the designers will be guiding us on
Exactly.
that. That won't be left just to the
Right.
communications group.
Yep,
Also,
exactly.
it should include the students.
Should include students, absolutely, yes. So there will be, and that's not to say, this isn't to say there's going to be one public forum, we will figure out with the designer how this looks and when we'll have them, but there will be multiple opportunities. And process-wise, all the input gathered at those forums will then be brought back to this committee and to the designers and everything to be used in the design work.
That's such a good point, though, Frank, about including the students. And I'm thinking there must be a middle school newsletter or something that.
Oh, we're gonna do better than that. We're gonna,
but I
we'll
mean,
tag them
but
directly.
in terms of our list of who we have on our distribution list.
Well, we have
If
the
there's
middle
a-
school PTG on it.
Okay,
Which
so
is
if
the
there's
parents,
anything
yeah.
else that goes out to the
Yeah, I'm also
kids.
using the automated email school system to send periodic updates. I just did it this weekend.
Okay,
so
great,
they're staying
great.
engaged for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know how we communicate with the middle school students.
Well,
these
getting to the
days,
kids, we need to do face to
Student
face.
council.
Student council, okay,
Surveys
student
and-
council, yeah.
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 Yep, so we could certainly ask the student council to help us, collect student input on what should go into this building.
Actually, at the trade school, the designer
Yeah.
actually went to all the students in the school and sat with all of them, 2 days,
Yeah, I
with a
expect.
bunch of guys, and went in there, and every kid there thought they designed the school,
Yeah.
and they still do.
Yeah. And we not only plan to do that, we've already done some of it. We had some great sessions and input from students last year when we were doing a lot of the educational visioning. So the students are definitely a part of our plan.
On the high school committee, we actually had a student that was welcome at these meetings every, and
Yeah.
that was great. I mean, they didn't come all the time because they had
Right, but
work
it's
to do,
it's
but,
great to hear the students' input. They have
but I don't know
such
about
great
middle
thoughts.
schools. It's sort of a different, but
Different age range, but
yeah.
you're welcome to invite one to join us, Justin.
Yeah, this was great.
Okay, good. I would just say overall, we know that at least Lori, Court, and I know, for us at least, reaching the parents is easy. That's the easy part for us. It's reaching the rest of the residents in town that's really hard to do. And we want everyone out there to know that that is our goal. We are trying to reach everyone who's interested, at least, in town with this information. And so my biggest question in terms of input and feedback would be if you see other things or have other ideas of how we can or should reach residents in town, please send them our way.
Comment as you design these things to go into make one level of it very simple about what's going on right now, and then make it easy to get to the detail.
Yep.
Okay, right there. A lot of people are just looking to find out what's going on right now.
Right,
Be able
yep.
to do that easily, but if I need to drill down and get to the documents, be able to do that easily.
Yep.
Good
We
way to
try
say
to
it.
do everything in the initial page of the website, right?
Well,
So
Right.
that's the idea of the headlines, and I think
Yeah.
this will be a work in progress. We'll see how it works, but the headlines, bum, 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 this is what we discuss, sustainability or whatever, and then a link to the more detailed, and then a link to the
Right.
minutes of the meeting. I mean, I think that's,
you.
technology is wonderful.
This was great.
Okay, good.
Just a couple of comments. Thank you for this.
Sure.
I think we need to always remind ourselves we're a town committee. So I think looking at this, we could probably tighten up our relationship with the public information officer.
Oh, we've sat down with her and met with her, and we're
That brings us
working closely with her.
They can. She's
Yeah,
an
exactly,
officer.
exactly.
Very correct.
Because this doesn't suggest exactly how that interface is gonna work.
It's still getting talked through.
So
That's
just
somewhat.
we'll pay attention to
why.
that. I think we should pay attention to Minuteman Media because they've been indispensable. Yes, it's easy to reach parents, but it's not easy to have the two-way dialogues that parents need. And you've heard me say this before, I'm sure I'll say it again, forgive me, but the biggest concern I hear that's sort of immediate and practical is 7:30 doesn't work for me, quote unquote. People who want to be here and can't. So these coffees are gonna do a great deal to offset that, I think.
Okay, good. Oh, in fact, I forgot to mention on the coffees, we figured that at any coffee, there should be at least one member of the executive or communications group. So either one of us or one of Tim, Dawn, or Lori will be there. And then we will be looking for other volunteers to join too, so that maybe every coffee has 2 people and at least one of them is part of the executive or communications subcommittee.
I'm sure we'll work out the details, but coffee to me means morning, which I think to Court's home that, 7:30 doesn't work.
Oh, yeah, a lot of the coffees we've hosted are evenings, midday.
Time of
But
day,
yes,
yeah.
definitely varied times of day. Some midday, some evening.
We will offer cider.
Yes,
The
they don't have to
coffee
be.
meetings and the coffee meetings.
Exactly.
The other thing is from the coffees and from every time we go out to talk to people, and whenever we do have a scheduled conversation with people, we'd like to see it on the agenda, just a follow-up, so that we are held to task to come back and bring input that we've collected from these meetings to this group. It's easy to lose that, and I'd just like to see that be part of the agenda.
Another idea, one of the things I've tried to do is, going to groups where they're already having meetings rather than just saying
Yes.
we're having a meeting, come join
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
Because that's not always appealing to folks, but find groups that already have existing meetings and ask to be on their agenda.
Right.
Yes.
We'll get more people that way.
Yeah, we did a bunch of that in the spring leading up to the town meeting vote, so we can certainly continue that
I
more
think
also.
as early on as you can, so it's not just like when we're getting close to to
Exactly.
a decision point, but so people feel part of the process.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, thank you. We're a little bit over, we'll probably have another 5 minutes here. I just wanted to do a couple of administrative things. Let's just go over where we are in terms of the next few meetings with the designer process.
So in terms of the design process, we meet in this room on Wednesday next, November 6th, and that'll be a 9 o'clock start for a series of then 5 interviews. They've been scheduled, they'll be posted. These are strictly interviews, and the public's invited, but the public won't participate because this is interview, not meeting per se. The expectation is presentations might take up to 40 minutes. Q&A would balance out, fill out the rest of the hour. There'll be an hour devoted to each one with a 15-minute gap in between each firm that comes in. Following that, the committee will stay in the room and stay convened for purposes of coming up with one most preferred that'll be brought to this committee, one alternate or a second, if you will, and subject to the decision of this committee, then those top 2 recommendations go to the town manager for negotiation purposes. So I believe correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, the meeting that follows the November 6th interviews is our November 14th.
So the question was
Yeah,
whether we could meet next week and do it the 7th and not lose a week to get the finalists to the town manager.
so could design bring the recommendations to this committee a week from today? Could we set a meeting?
And then we think we'd probably go on a little bit of hiatus because we need them onboarded before we really have another step to take. So most likely we trade the 14th and you have a week on. Is that doable?
Makes sense to me.
Let Court
John?
finish.
This is a question of process. In terms of looking at recommendations, is that done before the interview?
Bill's working on that right now. Yeah, thank you.
If that's possible for you guys to do that.
Yes.
So just looking out further, so if we meet the 7th and not the 14th, then a week later is the 21st and a week after that is Thanksgiving. So would we be looking at kind of shifting and doing the 7th and the 21st? Likely, or we don't know yet?
I think we need to talk that over with
Okay.
Bill.
Yeah.
Okay, but why don't we just set the 7th then?
Yeah, the feedback I've had from Hill and Dawn both, who couldn't be here this morning, was that until the designers firmed up and ready to work with us, we get a little
There's
bit of a
not
window
much else
there
to
to not need meetings
Yeah,
necessarily.
and it seems like we're having just this constant barrage of meetings, and we are, but the sooner that we get this to the finalist and the negotiation going with the contract, the sooner we'll have the designer. And then with the initial collaboration of the designer and the OPM on setting the schedule is really a big deal. That's where we want to get to as rapidly as possible, so this would be helpful.
Definitely.
So can everyone, all right, well, why don't we do that
Yes.
then, when we set the
Yep.
meeting on the 7th, and we have to take care of what's necessary for notification of that, that's next week. Okay, that's where we are, and then we'll be back to you on the meetings after that. The other administrative item, you all received minutes of the meetings of 9/19 and 10/3 of this building committee. And I'd like to see if there are any comments on those. And if not, I would entertain a motion to approve them.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
That's Chris. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I think now we're current up to
Yeah.
up till now.
Yeah.
All right, comments from the audience, yes.
Sorry, I continue to improve. I'll be quick. But
Brian, can you just,
Identify?
I'm sorry, Brian Foltz, 33 Riverdale Road. Can we bring up the slide from the sustainability presentation on Passivhaus? But while that's happening, I'm gonna make two comments in communication. The resources folder, there's documents and presentations. I think anything that's posted on the website should be something presented at the committee. We've talked about this with other committees, but resource folders or shared folders where individual committee members could add something or so forth tend to become a Wild West and can get out of control. So just from that standpoint. The other comment about the communication plan is no offense to Tom, but the PR, a public relations officer synthesized the information that was discussed. We have to make sure that doesn't become an advocacy for a yes vote for the project.
Correct.
To be just informational. There's a real chance that could become.
yeah, no, I'm a little
We're
hyper
very aware
about
of
that,
that.
Brian, so
All right.
we'll be careful, thank you.
So, but going to this slide, I wanted to mention, if you look at that graphic, this is where the idea of sustainability is integrated into the design process and it's not a bolt-on aspect of the project. And so sustainable projects that incorporate these ideas as they go through the design and construction come in on better budgets than those that try to do them at the end and bolt them on. So I just wanted to reiterate that, and this is a great graphic that kind of shows that idea of how you have to think about it through the process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Could I have a moment?
Oh, yes.
This is information. The trade school is holding an open house the 17th of November, which is a Sunday, from 1 to 4. So if anybody would like to go, now's the time to do it. Okay, and you don't have to call me up like everybody else is.
Thank you. Anyone? All right, the motion to adjourn?
So,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.